Welcome to the Fearless Homeschool podcast with Macaulay, talking everything homeschooling, family, learning and life. A space where we can learn and grow together because
why do it alone?
Welcome back to Season 1 of the Fearless Homeschool podcast. This week's two-part chat, we get to know Tim Nixon, who with his wife Rachel are the brains behind the Steiner Home Education Australia. Tim has been teaching for 20 years and is in his third cycle within Steiner Education. Tim's wife Rachel has also been through a few Steiner cycles herself as she takes the primary facilitator role for their 4 children's home education. Tim has been a school delegate for Steiner Education Australia, the peak body of Steiner education in our country, and is an author and regular speaker across Queensland and New South Wales. And as we roll through this week's episode, you can't help but get caught up in Tim's passion for the learning approach. So let's get stuck in. For today's episode, we are welcoming Tim to our podcast. Tim is one half of the Steiner Home Education Australia with his partner Rachel, and I'm so excited to chat with them about how they created and lived a Steiner-based curriculum in their home. So welcome, Tim, to the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Awesome. I'm excited to learn more about Steiner, but before that, could we hear a little bit more about who you are and what drew you to homeschooling as your family's educational option?
Okay, well, I'm a primary school educator. I'm actually a Steiner teacher. I've been in Steiner Education in New South Wales and Queensland for the last 20 years as a class teacher. And my wife is an early childhood teacher. She got a degree in New South Wales and worked briefly in the early childhood sector. So the way that I ended up coming to homeschooling and Steiner Education, obviously I've worked in it professionally for a long time, but I had some colleagues. I'm a father of 4, as you mentioned, and I had some, not colleagues, but some friends who were staunchly going to homeschool from day one with their children. And they knew I was a Steiner teacher and they're quite partial to the Steiner method and pedagogy, but they weren't teachers. And I was like, oh, wow, such a big responsibility. Oh, I'm training at uni. Oh, wow, it's all this big complicated thing. And they did it and they're really embracing it. And it was really authentic and beautiful. And I could see that their family was really benefiting from it. And we'd always intended for our children to have a Steiner education. And so the intention was for my child to work at the school that I was working at. And that's how it started out. She went into prep class, or what we call that's kindergarten in Queensland, it's called prep. And so we went through that for a couple of terms and we just found it to be quite difficult, if I'm being perfectly honest. The school day and centering your life around the school day and being here at a certain time and all the rest of it. And obviously as a professional working in the same institution, there was other, there's complications with that, and timetables don't always marry up, obviously. So we just sort of really found it to be more difficult than we expected, I guess, just in terms of managing that balance of school and life, I guess. And then we sort of scratched our heads for a moment and then remembered our friends who had been plugging away so beautifully and had been so inspiring to us. And we said, well, if I'm a teacher, a Steiner teacher, and you're a teacher, well, surely we should be home educating our own children. Who else, is more qualified? So that was kind of the thought process there. And so we started with my oldest child. She's just turned 18. We started with her when she was 6 turning 7, and we took her all the way through, and we've just done that with our other children, in sequence. Yeah, I don't know.
So 12 years.
Yeah. My wife's been doing it now for 12. Well, we've been doing it in concert, but of course, my wife is my children's primary educator. She's here with them in the trenches every day, so to speak. So yeah, she's doing a great job.
It's very funny that you say that, because when I introduce my husband and I in terms of our homeschooling roles, I say that I'm in the trenches and he's the curiosity, and he does that very well. And so I don't try to pretend that I'm the curiosity, because that's his. That's his area. Is it the same for you guys or not so much?
No, very much. I think that we've tried to work at sort of trying to honor what we consider Steiner pedagogy to be and the Steiner method, which is really centered around the educator knowing themselves very well and really trying to engage in some inner work and being and carrying an awareness of their inner life, so that when they're teaching, they're really trying to strive to be the most present and best version of themselves, as we all find so difficult to do with our own children. But yeah, it's one of those things where the more that you know yourself and the more that you act like yourself, the easier it is, and the more that your student and your child can be inspired by you and can kind of pick up on what you're trying to put down, if I can put it that way.
Yeah. Nice. So, can you sort of s- let us know what the Steiner philosophy is and how obviously you were drawn to it because you're a teacher, but how did that transpose into homeschooling versus a classroom?
Sure. So I guess I should probably say that Steiner education is based on a sort of philosophy, a spiritual philosophy, which is called anthroposophy. And that was sort of invented, for want of a better word, or initiated by a man named Rudolf Steiner. And I came to philosophy not through education. I became a teacher, but I was already aware of Steiner's work from a sort of more meditation, spirituality
Yeah.
kind of perspective. And it wasn't until I'd kind of engaged with some of his work that I realized that there was a whole educational component to his sort of framework that he's kind of building there. So I came to it largely through my wife. Her grandfather, who's passed away now, he was on the board of the first Steiner school in Australia for 20 years. So he's had a lot of personal involvement in that, and I was fortunate enough to spend some significant amount of time with him while he was still alive, and he kind of coaxed me into teaching into Steiner education and kind of opened my eyes to that possibility, and so I'm forever grateful to him for that. But it was kind of through a family connection that I engaged in it, and I kind of, to be perfectly honest, as a teacher coming to it from more of a mainstream paradigm, when I was taught in university, there's a lot of ideals that presented to whatever university course you want to name. You'll have a lot of hopefully you'll have a lot of professors and experts trying to profess their passion for the cutting edge ideals of the profession and blah blah blah. The reality is often very different, as you're probably aware. And so I found myself kind of faced with this paradox of being taught by these people what the ideal of education is, philosophy and pedagogy around that, and then going out into the real world, so to speak, and just going, oh my goodness, this is not what I was taught was optimal or the best or, kind of ideal by any means. No disrespect to those people who are working in there, all respect to them, and they're doing a hard job, but certainly I kind of found it quite lacking in a lot of ways, probably primarily in the arts, if I'm being
Yep.
simplistic about it. And I applied for a job, and I started there, and so that kind of gave me that view of Steiner education on the other side of the curtain, from the educator's side, not so much from the parents or the sort of observers outside of it view. And yes, certainly once I availed myself of a little bit more of the philosophy behind it, I couldn't help but notice that it was very, very similar to a lot of the ideals that were professed to me while I was doing my tertiary education, but also underpinned with a lot more of a spiritual element to it as well, which I found quite profound and has really been the one of the core things that's kept me within the broader Steiner movement to this day.
Yeah, beautiful. And it has a lot of the ideas. I'm a secondary teacher by trade. You probably didn't know that.
Sure.
So, yeah. So I totally understand because again, homeschooling now my own children.
Okay.
And we were actually drawn to a lot of Steiner when we were deciding whether we were going to homeschool or not, because our daughter is extremely creative and artistic, and the mainstream learning for her wasn't linking her learning because it wasn't using that portion of it.
Yeah,
So it's such an interesting, well, it's simple but an interesting way to teach and move through learning with kids.
for
So
sure.
can you explain that? Because I know there's different stages of learning, the way Steiner sees different stages of learning, and what underpins each of those kind of stages, etc.
Okay, so yeah, I would characterize Steiner education as opposed to other sort of pedagogical models, say like Montessori is another system that we, I guess, for want of a better word, that we get compared with and confused with often.
Yep.
So we focus primarily on the developmental stages of childhood, and primarily on the developing consciousness of the child. So if I can kind of posit that this conversation that we're having right now, in reality more broadly, is completely dependent on consciousness. If I don't possess it, this doesn't happen. I'm not aware of it. And if you don't possess it, it doesn't happen. It might as well not exist. It doesn't, for all intents and purposes.
Yep.
What Rudolf Steiner essentially indicated is that as we grow as human beings, our consciousness grows. And at the start, we're not very aware of everything. We can't be. So if I can use hand gestures for this, apologies for those people who are going to be listening to this, but we're going more from the seed as we begin, and it slowly opens up, rather than a picture of an empty vessel that I'm trying to fill up. Okay, it's a much more organic picture of how a human being develops, and it's based on nature essentially. So we look at the child, if I can go from year one or grade one, if we generally, well, we don't generally, Steiner Education more broadly advises that children don't engage with education until they're 6 turning 7. And there's reasons for that, but I'll leave that for the moment, and we can come back to that later if you want. But certainly we take the children from 7 years old and we look at them and we say, okay, what state of consciousness are they in? And just to give an example, Steiner said, well, he characterized that sort of 6-7-year-old consciousness as like a fairy tale consciousness, where everything's magical and the trees can talk and the animals speak to each other and there's fairies and gnomes and all this kind of stuff, right? And kings and queens and magical forests and dragons. Beautiful, beautiful pictures. And so he said, if their consciousness is of that quality, well, then if you bring them education with those pictures, they'll eat it much more easily and readily than otherwise, because it meets them where they are. So it's in a form they recognize, and they, to use a more, I guess, less tangible, they resonate with that. At particular stages of their development, they resonate with certain content because it's from Steiner sort of said, it's from a certain consciousness that content comes. So if you can find that and then incorporate that into what you bring to the child at a certain time, it'll go in much easier. There'll be less resistance. They'll be like, this is like the best food I've ever eaten in my life. How did you know it felt like fairy tales right now? I didn't, but Steiner did, thankfully, and so that's just an example. So we move through, and I guess the long and the short of it is, with that view, I'm not going to teach you algebra and coding when you're 7, right? No disrespect to anybody who does that, but from this view, that's completely inappropriate because you're not conscious enough to fully fathom that. When you are, then I bring it. So you can fully fathom it and you dive to the bottom and go, I get it. And I go, great. I haven't tried to cram it down your throat because you're ready for it. If I don't wait for you to be ready for it, it's a fight. I don't want to fight you. I want to teach you. So I have to find better ways, less belligerent ways to get in. And if I acknowledge the stage of development that you're at and where your consciousness is at, well, then I can much more easily and effectively meet you. And further to that, if I incorporate the arts, storytelling, drawing, painting, singing, dancing, movement, sculpture, you're going to enjoy it a lot more, because all of a sudden this plain old bread is suddenly this smashed avo with cheese and salt and pepper and parsley, and it's awesome. Sourdough. It's not plain old bread that you don't want to eat. Yeah. Yeah.
It's so, two things I've taken that, which is so interesting. What you have just described really is the goal of every homeschooler, whether they choose to go down Steiner. And obviously
100%.
that was his goal for a class setting as well. If I remember correctly from what I've read, he actually created the education side of things for his own workers. And that's 100%. Where that stemmed from. So that was beautiful that he had thought about that for his own people in a classroom setting. But that is the core of what we as homeschoolers want for our children, is to work with them at their own level of consciousness, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But secondly, there's another thing, and I was having a conversation today, and then when I was getting ready for our interview, I thought about it more, was that another homeschooler, a very experienced homeschooler, said to me, well, we're talking about read alouds and storytelling, and she goes, storytelling is a lost art in our in our society now, and it's so interesting because as I was getting ready, I thought about it, and Steiner is very big on that, isn't it,
Oh,
with those junior
huge.
years?
It's huge.
Yeah,
And I mean, all through, I guess more from the sense that one, it's human to human engagement. So if I'm telling you a story, it's a shame I don't have a book here, but I can certainly show you the difference. Once upon a time, the
yeah,
car lay, there was a magical forest. Or once upon a time,
yeah.
there was a magical forest. Mm. So there's a different gesture there. I'm engaging you and I'm reading you. I'm reading you. In
Yes.
good storytelling, I'm reading the audience and I'm like, what's going to, oh, they like that. Oh, this one's not paying attention. Something scary. Oh, now you're back. Okay, and on we go. So it's an art in that it happens almost like a performance art. Yeah, but certainly the quality of the transmission, if I could put it that way, if you want to really transmit information and knowledge to someone, and you can just think about Indigenous cultures. Let's take the Australian Indigenous culture, for example.
Yeah.
Oral tradition. They don't have any
Mhm.
written, there's nothing written.
Mhm.
So they just tell stories. They yarn, they
Yeah.
tell you how life is, and you go, yeah, and you absorb it because they're telling you, not some digital form of it's transmitting it with flashing lights, not there's a book or an electronic voice that's informing you how it is. Another human being is engaging you in real time, in real life with their energy and reading you. So it's an exchange.
Yep.
So yeah, certainly storytelling, that's kind of skimming the surface really with Steiner's perspective on it, but absolutely one of the cornerstones of Steiner education. And then as we go through, not only storytelling, but then the relating of everything as much as you can verbally. So if I'm going to tell you about, you're in grade class 6, for example, grade 6, and we're talking about ancient Rome, I'm going to tell you about the exploits of Julius Caesar. If I can learn some of it myself and it goes into me, then you absorb it much better because I've already digested. I'm chewing on like mummy bird, num, 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 num. And then I give you a digested form because I know you, because you come from me. Who else
Yeah.
is going to know you better than me? So,
Yeah.
well, ideally, in an ideal, society, ideal world, I should know my children better than anybody. So
Yep.
I'm going to just gnaw off these little bits and kind of soften it up and go, whoa, that's going to go in just like honey for you. Yeah, so definitely that storytelling, huge part of it.
And like you said as well, one of the other cornerstones is not delaying, because it's not delaying, but in terms of written and learning to read and write, all of that kind of comes a little bit later than what a
For
mainstream
sure.
curriculum would. And
For
could you
sure.
kind of explain the reasoning behind that?
Absolutely. It's a really good question. And it is certainly the case. In my opinion, that's kind of a cornerstone of Steiner education,
Mm.
what you refer to as the delay. So, as we said, we don't start the formal education of children until they're 6 turning 7. Now, I'll very briefly describe why one of the reasons and the main reason Steiner kind of posited that. And then with Steiner education, I always try and tell people, if you're going to try and avail yourself of an understanding of it, be prepared to sort of pick things up and go, I don't know if I can. Oh, wow, that's exactly what I think. I don't know if I understand. That's kind of what it is. There's a lot of stuff in there that he's got a huge body of work, and a lot of it's going to take a lot of pondering. Do I agree with that? Do I not? What's that even mean? That's what it's
Mhm.
meant to. It's meant to be chewed on. So with the reading and the writing, as I say, we don't start the formal education until they're 6 turning 7. And Steiner indicated that the reason for that, the reason he wanted Steiner educators to do that was because up until that point, the energy, as simply as I can put it, he kind of talked about, maybe I can use the word, I'm a Tai Chi practitioner, maybe I can use the idea of chi or life energy or like energy in your body. Okay. Before the age of 6 and 7, which is when you develop your secondary teeth, that's when your teeth fall out and you get your adult teeth start to come through.
Mhm.
Before that time, Steiner sort of indicated that the energetic part of your body up until that point is forming your organs and your brain and everything else. They're not formed. They're not fully formed. They're in a process of expanding and unfolding and becoming. So
Yep.
to educate a child before that time actually takes that energy. Like if I just say your lungs, for example, if your lungs are forming during that time and I start to suck all that energy away from lung formation into cognitive brain formation, well, then your lungs suffer in a sense because of that. because that
Yep.
energy has been taken away from that process. So he was like, wait until this time. When the secondary teeth come in, that's a sign that the body's like, this is all the rest of this is pretty much done. Go with the brain now. I'm freeing up that energy now for brain and in intellect formation. So we therefore, when the child turns is 6, turning 7, we introduce the alphabet, we introduce the numbers, we introduce the 4 operations, plus, minus, times, divide. We start to bring the concept of letter sound correspondence, and that letters have a sound and it can change depending on context. And we start to bring letters together. So we read from grade 1, year 1, class 1, but we don't introduce formal readers, as in look at Spot, next page, go Spot, go. But Spot can run. We
Yep.
wouldn't do that until later, maybe grade 2 into grade 3, depending on the class. The teacher's going to read the class. And so in an institutional context, this is going to vary. But for us, as Steiner Home educators, we bring the letters. So it's sort of letters to words in class 1, and then we go to words to sentences in class 2. And then, of course, once you've got sentences, well, then you can start to go into paragraphs and books and chapters and all the rest of it. So we would say probably from around the end of class 2 into class 3, that's when we start to really put more of a definite focus on, okay, we're going to read this now, and we're really going to put our intellectual energy at full force towards this. Before that time, we're just putting all the building blocks in. We're working with the fundamentals, so we're building a foundation that everything else can be built upon when we want to crawl upon it later and build upon it later. But certainly foundational stuff first, and then we start to branch into the more formalized readers and, trying to have your child read aloud to you and all the rest of it, bringing that full literacy attention to consciousness with the child. We tend to try and leave that off and just bring it at a slow and steady pace.
And that's so interesting in so many aspects, because for starters, I've said this in the podcast, I've said this in another episode, but my husband and I both, when we talk to our parents, we didn't actually put reading together until we were grade 3. Neither of us were early readers. It actually took us that amount of time.
Yeah, for sure. Very
and we've
common.
seen that. Yeah. And we've seen that with our kids as well. But also, how freeing is that for the children to know there's no other pressure than understanding the sound and the letter, and then slowly and gradually going forward when ready.
For sure. I mean, to me, it's kind of like the difference between, let's take swimming as an analogy, okay? Perfect analogy. If I'm going to teach you how to swim, obviously, one of the things I'm mindful of as a parent is I don't want you to be scared of the water. I'm teaching you to swim so that you're capable and you're not scared of the water, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So we all know kids can get scared of the water. If they end up in deep water, I swallowed water, I'm terrified, I don't want to go in again. Bad. We don't want that. Okay. Let's just keep that in mind. So if I don't want you to have a bad experience when you swim, I take you to the little kiddies pool, really shallow water. We flap around for a little while. You get accustomed to it. Blah, blah, blah. You splash. I might pour water on your head. If you've ever had swimming lessons with young children, there's a certain methodology that they're going through. They're not trying to terrify the child. They know the potential's there. In any learning process, there is the potential you're going to turn the child off, okay, or the adult for that matter. So we go slowly and steadily, and we gradually increase your exposure until, before you know it, you're doing doggy paddle and having a great time, and you're singing the song or the rhyme that you learned that, tells you what to do and swim for the side or whatever, and it's great fun. And then over time, you get further and further out, and then all of a sudden you're swimming in the deep end, you're confident, you enjoy swimming, you can swim underwater and dive for the bottom and do bombs, whatever you want. Then you take it to wherever you want to go. You want to go surfing? Well, you take it up a notch. If not, you stay and you swim in the pool and you're happy and you're comfortable and you know it. Mm-hmm. Now, if we take that as an analogy for literacy, say reading in particular, if I force you to read before you're ready, what's going to happen? You know what's going to happen. They're going to go, no, I don't want it. I don't want to borrow it. Or even worse, there's something wrong with me. Yeah. They're asking me to do something. They expect me to do something. So as a child, I'm assuming that's a reasonable expectation. What you're asking me to do, I should be able to do it because you wouldn't ask me to do something I couldn't do. Because why would you do that? I trust you. So It means that if we force children before they're developmentally ready to do anything, not only do we run the risk of them sort of becoming averse to the learning process, losing what's most valued to me as an educator, which is intrinsic motivation, your desire of yourself to learn. That's all I want to cultivate. I want you to want to learn, because then I'm a lazy man. That makes my job easy. If you want to learn, I just put it on the table and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like,
Yep.
yay, that was so easy. So yeah, the last thing I want to do is turn you off. I want to have you enjoying it, have you coming back going, I want more, I want more. And I'm like, whoa, steady, young one, all in good time. Oh, please give it to me. So that when I go, all right, now it's time to go, nom, nom, nom. There's nothing holding you back. You're actually chafing. You want it.
Yep.
Your will is
Yeah.
strong and it's up and you desire it. I'm not, you have to learn this, eat it. No, not that. That's the opposite of what you want.
And we are so lucky in home education that we can do that even in stages. We can take the pedal off when we know we've gone too far if we're reading our
Absolutely.
child really,
Yeah.
really well. Much easier than even in a Steiner school,
Oh,
because we're
no,
dealing
yeah,
with just our children.
absolutely.
So it's yeah, you've said it beautifully. That, I guess, that's, even if you're not following Steiner, that's what you should have in the back of your head when you're home educating your child, is
100%.
that kind of process.
Yeah, it's all about what your children, what their experience is, and you want that to be of high quality. You want them to be motivated to come back for more, and you want them to enjoy it. I mean,
Mm,
we kind of say, oh, how can I enjoy doing Black Line Master Sheet of Mentals or something like that? Well, before it, we sang and we moved and we danced and then we drew something. That's how. So my cup is already full when I come
yes.
to that. I'm like, I've already done all this cool stuff. I'll do this. This is fine. Not dry bread and no butter again. I'm over it. Give
And
me something living.
you've just hit on where I wanted to go with that, because even though you're teaching sounds and the alphabet and the arithmetic and basic, you do it quite differently to a mainstream school, with dance and movement and music and rhythm very much a part of how they learn and they remember what they need to remember. So could you sort of move into that a little bit and explain
Sure.
that?
Sure. So again, with human beings, okay, if we're talking about education, we're talking about human beings, okay?
Yes.
So we're not robots. We're not automatons. We're not cups that are waiting to be filled. We're human beings. We have feelings and emotions, and we have certain characteristics about the way that we interact with the world.
Hmm.
And certainly young children in particular, if you want to, I'll put it in crude terms, if you want to capture their attention and you want them to you want them to listen to what you're saying, you have to put it in an artistic form. Now, that's a bit of a loose term, so I'll give it a little bit more definition. And what I mean by that is this, and I'll use the alphabet as a perfect example. So if I'm
Yep.
going to teach you the alphabet, I go, okay, I've got consonants and vowels, and I want to think about how I bring it to you. You're a little kid at 6, 7 years old. And from my orientation, that means fairy tale. Okay, fairy tale consciousness. So I'm going to bring you fairy tale pictures. One day, this boy woke up and he went out to his letterbox and all the letters were gone off letterbox. And it's like, that's funny. That had my last name on it. And then he walked down the street to the shop. The shop's letters were gone. All the letters had vanished. Pardon me. So he went to the wise woman of the forest. And she said, I was afraid this was going to happen. Oh, no, you're going to have to go on a quest for me. Can you do it? He's paraphrasing here. Oh, really, me? I don't know if I can do it. I'm only a little boy. Oh, I guess so. And he goes out into the forest and he finds this bear. And the bear's patting on his big belly as he walks along. And he says to the boy, oh, have you come from the old lady? Yes, I have. I've got a letter for you. You've got to take it back. You've got to save the kingdom, blah, blah. So he takes it back. Oh, it's Burr. Oh, you did so well. You found Burr. And I tell you the story. Then the next day I come back and I say, what was that story about? In the story, I want to touch your feeling life. I want you to go, ah, ha, ha, or, ooh, or, oh, I knew that was going to happen. That was good. So this is where the art of storytelling comes in. It engages you. It gives you emotional investment in what I'm going to teach you. Okay.
Hmm.
So then I go, what happened? And you go, oh, this amazing bit happened. And because it's in the form that speaks to you. If it's in fairy tale form, oh my goodness, it was like a fairy tale, but it was like made for me. Like you knew me and you wrote a story for me. Yes, I mean, no, that's not what I did. No, continue, young child. That's exactly what I did. But through that way, they absorb it much more readily and they get excited about it. So, oh, and I can remember. My feeling stimulates my memory. Oh, yeah. And so I bring it all back to my memory and I sequence it. What happened then? What happened then? Oh, yeah, great. And so what was the creature he found? It was a bear. We're going to draw the bear today. Yeah, okay. Well, can I draw in brown? You can draw him any way you like. We're going to draw a brown one. Oh, I'm going to do an orange one. It's a grizzly bear. And we talk about it. You get all excited. And we draw a picture of a bear. And I tell you another story after that. I go, oh, there was a crystal cave and the crystals cracked off the roof. And they went as they cracked off, whatever. And the next day I come back and go, what was that story about? And you go, oh, it's a cave. We draw a picture. Then I come back to the picture of the bear and I go, what was that about again? And you go, oh, that was the bear. Oh, yeah, what sound did he make when he played on his belly? I was like, buck, 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 buck. Did you know this? That letter's called B, and it makes a sound. And I reveal this whole magical realm of how letters stand for sounds. And you didn't know that, little kid, did you? And you go, what? And I go, yeah. And then not only does it blow your mind and engage you, you go, oh, wow. As a child, as my child, you go, oh, wow, mum or dad is now sharing secret keys with me. I didn't know this. I've been looking at reading and writing for a while going, I don't get it. I'm smart. I know I'm cluey. I just don't know. There's something they need to tell me. Oh, so it's all sounds and I put it together and that makes a word. Yes. But it's brought in a way that is artistic. It's got a story element. I'm invested. It's funny. It's sad. It's exciting. And then we get to the B. B is B. That's the dead artifact at the end of it. That's the dead fact. That's a cold hard fact. And we want to get that to that skeleton, the bones, after we feast on this rich meal of story and color and art.
Yeah. And is that then flows obviously in a more deeper fashion as the kids get older, but that flows through the whole process for them. It's always presented in that sort of feel.
Absolutely. So we really want to, again, oftentimes with Steiner education, people will talk about the idea of head, heart, and hands, or thinking, feeling, and willing. If you're familiar with that, I actually contend with that that's not the process of learning. That's a convenient way to say it, thinking, feeling, willing. It doesn't happen like that. It goes feeling, thinking, willing. I touch your emotional life and it sparks this emotional response and you're invested. You like the character, you hate it, it's drama, you're scared, it was funny, whatever. Then I stimulate your intellect. So we look at all content in three different ways. I stir your feeling love, then I stir your intellect. Then we get our will up to manifest something about what we've just learned or what we've been talking about into the physical world. So we write stuff down after that. You have to will, you have to use your will to do that. So I very specifically stimulate one area of your being, then another with the same content so that you get a look at it in three different ways. So when I do B, it's over. You hit it 3 times in a row, but from three different angles and in an artistic way so that you go, wow, this was quite colorful and there's images that I can carry. I remember how the bear looks. Well, that's convenient because we draw the bear in the form of the B. So I do his little head and then he's got his big belly as well. So the letter is the form of the bear. So it's an artistic tool for you to remember all of these things that I'm trying to get you to remember, which at the end of the day, when we look at, and I'm going to be quite critical here in some respect, but when we look at something like the Australian National Curriculum, we have to ask ourselves, why is it being constructed in the way that it has? And why are they asking children to do certain things at certain times? And the answer is, it's been used as a political and corporate football for a long time, and a lot of corporate influence has been sprinkled over it because they want a certain type of workup by a certain age. It is arbitrary. It has nothing to do with the development of your child, has nothing to do with what they're able to understand at what age. It has got to do with someone somewhere going, I reckon they should know this by now.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fair enough, but that's going to be a gross average at best. And my child and every parent does not believe their child is average. They believe they are unique and special and different to all other children, and therefore they need to be educated in a way that honors that.
Absolutely.
We're going to leave our chat with Tim there for today with the idea of using storytelling and art to incite feelings that help us connect memory to our learning. Join me on Thursday for the second half of my chat with Tim, where we delve deeper into intentionality of storytelling and discuss how he and his family have transferred Steiner philosophy into their home learning. Whilst you wait, if you want to know more about our Fearless Family journey, sign up to the Fearless Family Fables below. Thanks for joining us on the Fearless Homeschool podcast. If you'd like to stay connected in between episodes, check us out on socials at Fearless Homeschool. And if you'd like to hear more about our Fearless Homeschool journey, sign up to our Fearless Family Fables newsletter. But don't forget to subscribe so that you're the first to know when a new episode drops. Because
Why do it alone?